Hello, good evening. Welcome to the first of the two June Somerville Historic Preservation Commission's meetings. That is June 6, 2023 at 6:46 p.m. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And before proceeding, I'll add that pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Somerville Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted via remote participation. A recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. And next, we would do our customary introductions. Let me pull up the screen. Going clockwise, Mr. Bauer.
Hi, I'm Dick Bauer. I'm a lawyer. I was trained as a city planner, and I live in the Spring Hill neighborhood.
Falvey.
Hi, my name is Brian Falvey. I'm a resident of Ward 2.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Hi, I'm Robin Kelly. I'm the Realtor representative for the commission and also a historic homeowner in Union Square.
I'm Eric Parks, Chair. I'm a resident of Ward 3, an architect and also historic homeowner. And staff, we have Ms. Chekowicz.
Hi, I'm Wendy Chekowicz. I'm a preservation planner and planner with the Planning, Preservation, and Zoning Division.
And on tonight's agenda, we have 3 items. They're all demolition delay related. For anybody who's new to this process out there, just a reminder that the demolition delay process in Somerville is a 2-part thing. First, we have what is called a determination of historic significance, where we weigh the historic merits of a given structure without considerations for alternate uses of the structure, condition of it, kind of the macro level stuff. It's purely just to look at this particular structure as it relevant because of its association with important people or its architectural style or its relationship to the streetscape, stuff like that. If we designate a place significant, if we determine it's significant, then another public hearing is scheduled a month later when we review it for what we call preferably preserved status, which is a determination whether it's better that it be kept, whether it's weighing all the other conditions, the attributes of the property, its condition, other things, reports and such, whether it's best to be preserved. If we vote affirmative to that, then it begins an 18-month demolition delay process where we work with the owner to explore ways of keeping the building. Sometimes that results in outright maintaining the building. Sometimes it ends up with we reach an agreement before the 18 months is up about what either keeping the place means or memorializing it or salvaging pieces. It really varies from place to place. So that's the structure of this process. And the first 2 cases on our agenda are both determination of historic significance. The first one is HPC DMO 2023.10. Address is 25 Warwick Street. The applicant is Alec Charles Peralta Shearer. Owner is Alec Charles Peralta Shearer and Ann W.C. Peralta. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Do we have an applicant here tonight for that case?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Alec Peralta, you have been unmuted.
Good evening. My name is Alec. Actually, if we could unmute my wife, Anne, I think she's online too. She's going to present our introductions.
Yes. And you are unmuted as well.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to give a brief introduction to us and what we're proposing to do. We are Ann and Alec Peralta, owners and residents of 25 Warwick Street for the last 11 years, and Somerville residents for longer than that. I work for the State Department of Public Health, and Alec is a professional engineer and construction manager who specializes in transportation infrastructure. My grandmother was a first-generation American who grew up in Somerville and attended Somerville High. So our roots are deep here. And I organize our streets block party every year. And we've seen our street grow and change tremendously over the past decade that we've lived here. As our kids who are 8 and 5 get bigger, we are feeling the constraints of a house with only 1 bathroom. and imagining the benefits to our family of adding another bedroom and a little more living space. We love the look of our house and our green space, and so propose a renovation and addition that minimally changes those two things while giving us the space we desire so we can stay in the house and on the street we love. So what we are proposing is that we convert our 1 3/4 story house into a 2-story house, adding space to the second floor over the additions that have been made over the years to the original building mass. We hope to move the left walls to make the house 2 feet wider in alignment with zoning, and move the back wall 3 feet out to match a small bump out in our current kitchen. In order to make our 3/4 second floor into a full floor, we obviously need to remove and replace the roof, hence why we've come to this demolition hearing. When moving the walls on the first floor, we want to replace them so that they're more structurally sound and able to support the second floor, and add height to the basement walls that are particularly low. This is why we're seeking to demolish the left side and the back walls. After we've thought about this a lot, and after careful thought and consideration, we believe that demolishing these walls will help us to achieve our goal of obtaining another 600 or so square feet while maintaining the look of the house that we have loved since we bought it, with its bay window in the front and the windows in the mudroom. So that's just a brief overview of who we are and what we're trying to do, what brings us here tonight. So we appreciate your time and look forward to answering any questions you have.
Thank you. Is there anybody else in your group that wants to speak, or before we move on to public comment? You can always address things later on if we have questions.
Sure, I think Alec will plan to, he's the engineer, so he'll be here to answer all of those kinds of questions, but that's it for now.
Okay. In that case, I will open up this case for public comment. If anybody would, I'll let staff walk you through the process.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you'll be given 2 minutes to speak on this item. All right. Paul Morgan, you are unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself to be able to speak.
Hi, my name is Paul Morgan. I live at 54 Warwick Street with my family, and just want to say we're very much in support of the Peralta's project, and that they're very much well respected members of our community, and yeah, just that we support their project, that's all.
Thank you.
All right. Ron Cavallo, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself on your end to be able to speak.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street. I fully support this proposal.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm going through the list again to see if there's anyone else with their hands raised. I do not see any other members of the public with their hands raised. You may close the public comment.
Okay, I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. And just a reminder before we go, and just on the structure of this, the applicant nicely told us about their goals and plans for this. At this point, we don't really consider what might happen to the structure. That would be at a prep, if we happen to nudge it to the next hearing, that would be where we would consider things like that. It's existing conditions board. This is more of a review of the property in its own right about what it, as it is now, regardless of what you plan to do to it. So it's a little bit more straightforward. So with that, who wants to add anything about this first?
I will share my thoughts. So the house obviously retains a tremendous amount of its original form and massing and contributes significantly to the overall streetscape, which is still plentiful with these sweet little workers' cottages. So understanding that the owners have presented a very thoughtful plan, and thank you for describing your plans for the property and your desire to stay in place and continue to be good stewards for the property. But as Chair Parks noted, we aren't able to consider any of that at this time. So my feeling is, in terms of historic significance, I believe that this structure is historically significant as a nice example of a worker's cottage, and particularly as it plays on the streetscape.
Thanks.
I would agree to that. I understand that from the point of view of the applicants. The things that they love about their house that are the basis for them wanting to do this work is why we think that it's historically significant. But that's where we are in the process. Our job is to review for significance and then later make a decision about whether it's preferably preserved. And I agree that all of those things show that it's historically significant. And we'll talk about then what should happen and what's preferable at the next meeting once we get to that stage. And at that point, we can take into account other considerations.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Any thoughts, Mr. Falvey?
I was gonna say, I agree with the opinions that have been expressed and really don't have anything to add. I think it's a really great looking home, and it's wonderful to know how much the Peraltas have enjoyed living there and what their intentions are and what they would like to do to continue living. It sounds like a really fantastic neighborhood. It sounds like a really wonderful part of Somerville there. But I would agree with the sentiments expressed by Vice Chair Kelly in terms of it being significant, just as a representation of a worker's cottage. And I'm sure there's a cluster of them up in that neck of the woods. So I would consider it significant for that primary reason.
And I would add to that, this street, Clyde Street, there are very few, a little section of Dane Street, a few areas where they look very understated because they were meant for workers, usually brickyard people, not always. These are among the oldest neighborhoods in our city, and they often ironically look more understated than a lot of the grander Victorian type things. So I tend to take a really close interest in them. And I hear what you're saying about wanting to preserve that, and I respect that. And that would be something, if it were to be considered preferably preserved, if we vote that way, that's be one of those things where often we would work with a applicant and come to an agreement on what's replacing it under the review process with staff later on. So it's not, hearing that that's your intention, I think is a very positive thing. But at this particular stage, I would concur that it's a significant structure. So I think, does everybody else have anything to add, or we could move to a vote?
I move that we vote to find the property historically significant.
Second that.
Motion by Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Aye.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. And then we need to adopt findings. I would put out there the basic ones. It retains a lot of its original massing of an early worker house for Somerville. It relates to its streetscape. It's actually part of a collection of these things, so it has some distinction that way. You could also make a case for its connection to the socioeconomics of the time of the workers that worked in our brickyards, which is an early industry for Somerville. Is there anything else I think I'm missing?
I think those are the primary aspects.
Yeah.
I move that we vote to adopt those findings as expressed by Chair Parks.
Second that.
Motion by Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? And we'll do a roll call again. Mr. Bauer,
Aye.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I vote yes as well. Thank you, folks. And we'll have another meeting next week or next month when we go over the preferably preserved issue of this. You have any questions?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. And with that, we'll move on to our second case of the evening, which is HPC DMO 2023.11. Address is 246 Broadway. Applicant is Eminenti Construction LLC. Owner is the same as the applicant. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. Do we have an applicant here for this tonight?
Yes, Deepak Aminani, you have been unmuted. Please let us know if there's anyone else from your team that would like to be unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself on your end to be able to speak.
Good evening. This is Deepak Aminani. Adam Dash, our zoning attorney, is representing the project.
All right. Adam Dash,
Thank
you are also unmuted.
Thank you for unmuting me. I appreciate it. This is Adam Dash, 48 Grove Street in Somerville, here with Deepak Aminani, the principal of Amineni Construction LLC. I'm not sure if the architect Natalia Carino is here, but I guess for tonight's purposes, it's not as important. This is a significance hearing on 246 Broadway, which is a two-family house in the MR5 zoning district in the pedestrian street district. The applicant believes this structure is not significant because there's no historical association with historical persons or events or a broad history of the city or the Commonwealth. And there have been numerous alterations over time as outlined in the staff report. The concrete chimney, the replacement windows, the replacement doors, the enclosure of the windows on the right side, the removal of the dormer window on the rear, the two-story bay added to the front, the wraparound porch from the front to the left, the one-story addition in the rear, the enclosure of part of the wraparound porch on the left to extend the L, another two-story addition on the rear, the steps to the front porch, and then there's a series of sort of mazy rear decks and stairs you can see in the photographs. The staff report did quite a good job with these Sanborn maps. You can see how the footprint of this building changed quite a lot over time. I would note that even without the changes, this house is nothing special. I mean, there are many examples of this sort of two-family looking house all over the city. While it's not necessarily relevant to the significance finding, I did want to at least note that my client's looking to build something appropriate here for the MR5 pedestrian street district zone on the site, and the structure is in an unsafe condition per report of a structural engineer filed with this application, which if we get to the next stage, we can go in, we can bring that individual and talk about it in more detail. So therefore, the applicant asked the commission to find the structure not significant, and we're certainly here for questions and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have anybody else who wants to speak, or should we move to public comment?
Mr. Chair, we don't have anybody else to speak.
Very well. In that case, I will open up this case for public comment.
Any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand and you will be unmuted. Amy Stein, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Hi, I'm actually here for the Glenwood Roadhouse, but I just looked up this house. Is it 246 Broadway? Is that the address?
Correct.
It's like a totally historic house. It's adorable. That's all. I just want to say I disagree that it should be, they should keep the historic nature of the house. It's a beautiful house. That's all. I'm just kind of surprised at the description that they just gave for the house, because that is not an apt description at all. I'm staring right at a photo of it. And it's a totally historic house with like the teeth above the bay window and a beautiful porch. It's a beautiful house. That's all.
Thank you.
All right, Anne Vigorito, you have been unmuted. You will need to unmute yourself to speak.
Thank you, Wendy. This is Attorney Ann Vigorito, 424 Broadway, Somerville. I represent the owner of the property at 248 Broadway. It's Garfield Realty Trust. Robert DeLuca is the trustee. They have various concerns, as this is a house next door, and it's not in the purview per se of the Historical Commission, but their view on this house is that it is historical and that it kind of blends with the area of the homes on this section of Broadway. And the owner of 248 grew quite concerned when there was no plans to be seen or things of that nature that gives any direction as to where this property is going, because the fear is it's going to kind of stick out like a sore thumb, because as the attorney for the applicant stated, it's an MR5 zoning district, so this could be a 5-story building in a neighborhood of all 2 families. So I'm just voicing those concerns and the thought that it may take from the element of this particular neighborhood. And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean Miller, you are unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself. You're on here twice, so I'm going to unmute both of the names that you were assigned in under.
Thank you. I think we have a second family member who might speak as well.
Mr. Chairman, through you.
I would like to talk about the fact that this home is typical for the neighborhood. Can people hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And I would argue that it is historically significant and should not be demolished. The original footprint is still there. And the design is definitely within the historical streetscape, I would say, of the whole area, and going up and down Broadway and in the side streets of typically styled homes. I also wanted to talk about the fact that there are some historical people who maybe have resided in the home, which could also impact the decision to not demolish it. I know the first property was first developed maybe in about 1895, and there were a couple of boarders who were taken in, one of whom, Mrs. Andrew Woodbury, her husband was a member of the GAR Post 139. He was a Civil War private, and I thought that was pretty significant. And also Ellsworth Lothrop was one of the boarders that they took in, and I believe he was a clerk in Somerville at one point. I haven't had a chance to research all the residents of the home, but I do believe that it does bear further investigation, and would argue that it should not be demolished for its architectural significance and historically significant people who have lived there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean Miller, would you like to, I know that you said that there were 2 people in your household who would like to speak.
Hi, my name is Timothy O'Brien. I'm Jeannie's husband. We reside at 6 Montgomery Ave, which actually abuts the green space behind 246. I believe you've already done an evaluation on the integrity of the property, and you've all come to the conclusion that it's retained its integrity in its original form, which I agree with. What I believe is, just on our street alone and around our neighborhood, there's been 6 properties that have been completely renovated, and they're all 2 families, and they've all maintained that structural integrity in which they all look like 2 families. They've maintained that original mapping and the streetscape. I believe that we should maintain the historical significance of this structure. I agree with the first person who spoke that it is a beautiful property and that it should be, if this developer wants to renovate this property, he should be given that ability. But I don't believe demolishing this property and putting up a 5-story structure doesn't help with the streetscape of our neighborhood. I also believe that, taking away the green space in the back of the property should not happen in Somerville. And I believe, in closing, I just think that we've all agreed that the integrity of the property has been maintained throughout the years, and I believe it should be maintained going forward. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm just still going through the list. Ron Cavallo, you are unmuted.
Ron Cavallo, 70 Victoria Street. I agree with everyone that's spoken that the property should be preserved. It is a nice structure architecturally, and it looks essentially vintage, practically unchanged. And in this rare instance where I'm largely pro-development in a city that's largely anti-development, I feel strongly that this building should be maintained and preserved.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand for a 2-minute public comment period. Mr. Chairman, I'm just going through the list one last time. There are no other members of the public with their hands up. You may close the public comment.
I'll close the public comment portion of this hearing. And again, just a reminder that at this stage, we can't consider what might replace this structure and whether or not it would be better or worse for the neighborhood, such as 5-story buildings and all that. I understand that the zoning changes have added development pressure to these sites, but at this stage, as we've mentioned, we're examining this project in its own, the merits of the structure that's there. And who would like to go first? Actually, if I can interrupt, maybe it would help if we review with staff just to understand from reading your report the series of changes to the structure. Because I see a lot of mention of changes, but it seems like the bulk of anything that changed happened way back shortly after it was built. Just looking at your map progression here. Seems by 1900 everything.
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, a great deal of the changes over time happened long ago enough that they should have already retained historic significance of their own right. I think the ones now, the current alterations more recently, are that a portion of the porch was enclosed, some windows have been closed, and the windows and doors are all replacement, but and there's also additional stairs and decks in the back, but for the most part, everything that has been done to the property was done before 1947.
Okay, and the big deal, thank you, that the bay and the wraparound porch, which you suggest were added sometime between 1895 and 1900. So by 1900, essentially the massing that we today associate with this building was already there. Vast majority of it.
That's correct.
Okay. Anyway, so who would like to add or to talk about this first?
the property where it retains a significant amount of its original form and massing, and is, the alterations that have been made are easily retrofitted. My opinion is that it's historically significant.
So I will go next and second that, and also second all of the comments that were made by all of the people in the neighborhood. This seems like quite a significant building in terms of both its fabric, the amount of it that's original, recognizing that not all of it is, but all the form and massing, penetration, all of those things together make this seem like a pretty easy call that this is a significant building.
Thank you.
I really don't have anything much to add other than saying it. I mean, that property in particular seems to enhance that streetscape there a bit, compared to some of the other buildings that are around there. I don't know what it looked like originally, but it certainly does not, compared to a number of other buildings that we've seen over the years, does not look as though it has been significantly altered in a way that it's lost much of its integrity, but I'm not particularly sure about that. But I tend to believe that it also would be historic architecturally and would support voting for it as being significant.
I would concur. I'm just looking at the streetscape here, and it's part of a row of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 nearly identical, well, very similar front gable buildings, and it's by far the nicest one among them. And the one on its right is obviously it's a mansard, so it's not, it's a different pattern there. But I think on the streetscape, it has some importance that way. It's a lot of its original, or essentially its original detailing is intact with the stick work and the brackets and things like that. It's actually in pretty good shape. The windows, yes, they've been changed. It's hard to find one that hasn't had changed windows. So I would also be in favor of calling this significant.
Unless anyone has anything to add, I would move that we vote to find the property historically significant.
Second the motion.
By Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do a roll call with Mr. Bauer.
Yes.
Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly.
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. And for findings, the easy one is it's got a it's a pretty good example of has a lot of remaining integrity, and it's part of a collection of buildings in its streetscape of similar type. It's the best one of them, the most intact among them. No. Anybody want to elaborate on those?
I think you captured it pretty well.
Okay.
I vote that we adopt the findings as articulated by Chair Parks.
Second that.
Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Falvey. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? And we'll do roll call again. Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
And I'll vote yes as well. Thank you all. We'll see you next month. You know the routine.
Would that be next month or later this month, Mr. Chair?
I'll leave that for staff to wade through.
Mr. Chairman, through you, Adam, I will contact you tomorrow to figure out the timing.
Thank you, Wendy. Have a good evening.
Okay. Those were our determinations of significance. Now we have one determination of preferably preserved status, and that would be HPC DMO 2023.05, address is 23 Glenwood Road. The applicant is the Grace Spellenberg Revocable Living Trust. Owner is the same as the applicant. The applicant seeks to demolish a building constructed a minimum of 75 years ago. The applicant here with us tonight?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman, they are. Ann Vigorito, you have been unmuted.
Thank you, Wendy. Chairman Parks, members of the Historical Commission, Ann Vigorito, 424 Broadway, Somerville, Massachusetts, on behalf of the applicant, 23 Glenwood Road Trust. This evening, I know we're here for the preferably preserved component. You know, after reflecting on last month's meeting and hearing all of, you know, the testimony, there was an understanding that there was some sort of letter, and I don't know if it was a formal memorandum of some sort. We never received it, but you know, you know, we listened. You know, a lot of it sometimes, you know, it's the viewer of the eye of the beholder, so to say. But I did not receive, nor did my client receive, any memorandum. I think we reached out to historical staff if any memorandum had been presented to the board so that we could review it further. Because at this juncture, you know, as we just talked about in the two other cases, you know, the significance, you know, in this property was deemed significant, but I don't see how the, you know, preferably preserved component should be deemed correct here, as I do see, you know, there's significance, but I don't see where any, you know, members of historical history lived at this site. You know, this is a home that has been altered over the years. You know, it does maintain some of its original, but a lot of the alterations have masked those. So our contention would be respectfully that the property not be deemed preferably preserved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else in your group that would like to speak, or should we move on to public comment? Okay. I'll take that as a no. So I would, at this point, open this case up for public comment.
Any member of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand for a 2-minute public comment period. All right, Finian Morgaretti, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself to speak. Finian Morgaretti, you'll need to unmute on your end to be able to speak.
Sorry about that, folks. My name is Finn. I live across the street in a house of the identical age, builder, and architectural style. These houses are part of a group of 15 matching Victorian-era mansard homes, as was discussed at the previous hearing. And I also want to mention the previously submitted letter on historic significance that was signed by 17 neighbors, where we made the case in detail that preserving the house at 23 Glenwood is necessary and very much possible. And I don't want to waste time in going into the historic personages, but in answer to the applicant, there are very many, there's several historic personages connected with 23 Glenwood. But going forward on the question of preferably preserved, I'd urge the commission to consider our neighboring houses, which provide a nice model for future development. Right next door to 23 Glenwood, one of these homes is currently undergoing a top to bottom renovation and addition. In fact, the contractor slated for this 23 Glenwood proposal is the same one restoring the neighboring house. And this contractor himself lives in an identical home across the street that he has personally preserved and renovated. So my point here is that there's ample expertise and experience to show that these houses can be updated and expanded while saving the original roofline, windows, and architectural features. A couple other points: that preserving this house is very much in the public interest. Glenwood has a distinctive streetscape under a lot of pressure since the Green Line extension, and it's made up of historic homes with porches that open onto the sidewalk. And I've already spoken about the block party we hold there. The last thing I'll mention is that the applicant owns the immediately adjacent lot, which is empty. So there's plenty of flexibility to develop both properties together, making conditions, in my view, quite favorable for preservation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cassie Mann, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself on your end to speak.
Great. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm Cassie Mann. I live at 29 Glenwood Road, which is the house that Finn was just referencing that is undergoing a renovation right now directly next to 23 Glenwood. And I don't have very eloquent prepared remarks, but I just want to say that, echoing what Finn said, it is possible to preserve these homes if the desire is there. They're wonderful homes, and that's what my family is doing right now, is taking every step that we can to maintain the historic presence of our home and make it work for our family. And I think that there certainly could be a solution reached for 23 Glenwood that preserves that home. It's falling in the middle of our block of this group of 15 historic homes. It's really sort of one of the centerpieces of our block, and these mansards really tie the whole street together. And yeah, I'm rambling here, but I think it's possible. It should be possible to preserve this home, and it would be a huge detriment to our neighborhood and really to the city of Somerville to lose one of these homes. They really are greater than the sum of their parts. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going through the list. Pearl Emmons, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself to be able to speak.
Okay, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Pearl Emmons. I live at 30 Glenwood Road, kind of diagonal from the property that we were talking about and across from the property that's getting the current renovation. I spoke last time, and I think that the details in the report or in the document that we submitted with the neighborhood signatures really says so much about why this property should be preserved. But I will just iterate that I work as an agent, a real estate agent in the area, and I've driven through all of the neighborhoods. And this cluster of mansards, of two-story mansards, is very unique. I believe that the document said it's one of the first subdivisions, essentially, in Somerville. And I think that that in itself is reason to preserve the house and the front and the look of the house. I also think that if we allow one to be removed, then what is going to happen to our street where these are so dominant on our street? And will it suddenly turn into all of them getting removed to make with the Green Line coming? And then lastly, I do very much so support adding more units to the property. I know that we're not really talking about what could be done with it, but I wonder if there is some red tape that is keeping, sorry, my child is here, that is keeping the development of the plot next door and this property and keeping it from being done in a way that does allow more units, but yet still maintain the structure and the historical significance. I am finished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sarah Lennox, you have been unmuted on our end. You will need to unmute yourself on your end to be able to speak.
I think I've done that. I'm Dr. Sarah Lennox. I live at number 38 Ames Street on the corner of Ames Street and Bartlett Street. We are one house lot removed from the house at 23 Glenwood Road. Last time I spoke about how my husband and I walk in this neighborhood and regularly appreciate the architecture, the historical significance, the modesty and elegance of these homes, which were built for workers who lived in Somerville. Somerville is not only a place that you can show the history in photographs, but you can show it on its street, on its streetscape. You can see the impact of different eras of history. The street where I live happens to have been developed in 1890 by a developer who produced larger single-family Victorian homes for commuters who traveled on the commuter rail on Central Street. These are larger than the mansards, but they are in a cluster on a block and all contribute as a unit whole to the sense that this was a place where certain people lived at an era of history, which is in the past, but which we can appreciate when we walk down the street today. I fear that if demolition is allowed in one little house on 23 Glenwood, then soon we're all to follow, because we all live within half a mile of the new Green Line stop. We all know what the property values have done, what the property taxes have done, what the city might look to from the point of view of revenue, or what the owner might look to from the point of view of developing a multi-unit structure on that location. There is a second lot immediately adjacent, which could be used for something like affordable housing, should that be decided upon. But it is very important to me as a human living in this neighborhood that the structure not be demolished. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand for a 2-minute public comment period. Amy Stein, your hand was raised. You're unmuted on our end.
Hi, I spoke a little bit earlier about the other house, but I also live across the street from 23 Glenwood. And I want to just reiterate, I don't want to reiterate what everyone said, but I agree with what everyone said. And I think just overall in general in Somerville, since we've moved here, we've just seen this kind of haphazard, crazy restructuring of streets and neighborhoods and houses that don't in any way match the historical significance of the original structures and or the structures that are around them. It's like basically what's being built is just assembly row housing everywhere. These kind of just non-houses, like there was the beautiful building on Broadway that got knocked down, the one with the 2-story brick one across from the post office, and there's just a big ugly building there now, and you're kind of seeing it over and over again. And we're looking at our little street and we're like, we have this beautiful group of historical homes. No one is against anyone renovating, gut renovating, restructuring their house to work with them, but what we're all against is the destruction of the historical significance of the street and of each individual home, and what opening up for one would do to our street, and then just in general the rest of Somerville. And I'd also just like to add, because again, I don't want to reiterate what everyone has already said, because I so strongly believe in what everyone has already said. What they're planning to do with the new structure at 23 Glenwood is to build something that wouldn't face the sidewalk. And our street is a very sidewalk friendly street. All the porches directly look out onto the street. If you're sitting on your porch, a small gathering could take place at any moment because all of the neighbors on our street are very close. In fact, we almost all have keys to each other's houses. And we have, like we've talked about, a block party, but those block parties without unsanctioned block parties pop up all the time. So just even the idea of someone trying to knock down the structure and not replicating the historical significance of the structure and maintaining that historical significance beyond that, they're also kind of planning on destroying the community energy of the street by building something that doesn't face the sidewalk because they have that other lot. So I'd like to also just say, none of us are against restoration or expansion, but we would like to see a plan that represents the historical significance of the property.
Thank you.
All right, any other members of the public wishing to speak on this item, please raise your hand to speak. All right, I do not see any other members of the public with their hands up. Mr. Chairman, you can close the public comment period.
All right, I'll close the public comment portion of this case. Yeah, who wants to contribute first?
I will share that the property's position, as has been discussed by many of the neighbors, and as we touched on in our last meeting about the historical significance of the property, it's very important as a component of this group of two-story mansards along Glenwood, and as such, you know, is very much preferably, in my mind, very much preferably preserved. And I also am wondering, and this is something the neighbors may want to discuss and we may want to discuss, but whether creating a local historic district for this group would make some sense, so that rather than going one by one, we can protect the group as a group of houses. But in my opinion, 23 Glenwood is preferably preserved as a historically significant property.
So I will join with all of that. The house individually, although not totally intact, has enough intact in terms of its form, in terms of its massing, much of its fenestration, together with the information about the streetscape, which is really unique in Somerville. This group of houses built all together that were in the picture that we were shown last time, most of which are still there. I think this is an easy call.
Yeah, I would agree with the observations, opinions of both Vice Chair Kelly and Dick had to say as well too. I think that the pride that the neighbors have in that neighborhood is wonderful, and I think that that's something that we don't hear that often, and that's just so powerful to me, you know, about what makes that neighborhood perhaps unique. And then when you just look up and down the street, see a number of the different houses that have been preserved of the mansion style, I think it's so special, you know, and I think it really, it says something unique about that neighborhood. It's very, very important. I totally support making that property preferably preserved.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah, I don't really have anything to add. It seems to me a very clear cut case of preferably preserved structure. It has everything. It's this relation to the streetscape. It's a very old building of this type for the Somerville. It's reasonably intact. So,
so if no one has anything else to add, I would move that we vote to find the property preferably preserved.
I second that.
Motion by Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? And we'll do a roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. And for findings, I think it's the biggest, well, two big things. It's it's a good intact version of a mansard cottage, which is a fairly early structure type in the city, not the earliest, but it's early. And then more importantly, the streetscape, just its relationship to the buildings around it. That's a, if not unique, it's exceedingly rare thing to have in Somerville, a street with this kind of history.
Yeah.
Well, those are the two biggies. And I think there was also mention of association with some important people that was brought up at the last hearing, and I don't remember exactly what those were. I think it was the builder of the neighborhood.
I think it was Mr. Partridge.
Right. Okay. Any other tweaks or additions, subtractions?
I move that we vote to adopt the findings as articulated by Chair Parks.
I second that.
By Vice Chair Kelly, seconded by Mr. Bauer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll do a roll call again with Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes as well. And thank you all. We'll can contact staff for the next step. Okay, those are our cases for tonight. And we have some other business to go over in no particular order, although there is an order. Commission elections, calendar, I've got minutes and a CPC update. Any reason we want to break out of that order? If not, the first thing is the commission elections. Can't believe it's been a year again already.
Crazy.
Anybody want to run for anything or not run for something?
I'm happy to nominate Chair Parks for another term.
I'll second that.
We have a motion to install me as chair again for another year. Forward by Mr. Bauer. Seconded by Vice Chair Kelly. Thank you for your encouragement there.
Thank you for
Are
your
we
service.
allowed to make it a 4-year term?
I don't think that's in
not.
You never know. We have in the wings coming into the commission at some point. I think I've heard 3 new members who are working their way through the city vetting process.
Right.
Those folks, if they happen to be listening, should be fortunate they didn't get installed in time for this hearing because they might have found themselves being bumped immediately to secretary or something.
Yeah.
Dodged a bullet. Okay, well, we have this motion for me, and I guess I forgot what the protocol is. Do I vote on myself or do I abstain?
You can, but I think first we have to close nominations. I move that we close nominations.
For chair, okay.
I second that.
Right. All in favor then of me as chair?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All opposed to me? All right, we'll do a roll call. I will abstain. Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and Mr. Falvey.
Yes.
Looks like you're stuck with me for another year.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And that brings us to the vice chair, which is Vice Chair Kelly.
I would like to move that we nominate Vice Chair Kelly.
I
For a
second.
lifetime appointment.
Okay. Good to me. So,
So I second that.
okay. So with me, we also had a vote to close
Yep, so
nomination.
I move that we close nominations.
Okay. I will second that. I guess I'm allowed to second things. Sure. All in favor of Vice Chair Kelly acting as vice chair again for the next year? Aye.
Aye.
I will abstain.
Okay, and opposed? We'll go through the roll call of Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly abstained, and Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. Okay, so you have your dynamic duo here. We currently have no secretary, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
And we have somebody with staff who's been doing our minutes for us, very thankfully.
Yes, and just as a small note, we've hired someone to actually come, whose job it will be to take notes for all the boards and commissions.
Oh, wow.
That
We
is,
start next week, hopefully.
I don't know how we could budget enough money to pay for that service. We only have 50 million to play, yeah. That's a very thankless job.
That's huge.
Yeah.
We're very excited.
Well, is anybody willing to throw their hat into the secretary ring? Otherwise, what do we do? Just sort of.
I vote that we wait to nominate secretaries until we have the additional members onboarded.
I second that.
Good idea. All in favor of Vice Chair Kelly's proposal? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do the roll call. Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I'll vote yes. I think that's it for elections, right? Unless we created any new roles in the last year. The next matter is the calendar. I know staff wants to introduce this, but we all know what the situation. What was it, about half a year ago, we decided to try out the bi-monthly meetings. What are people's impressions?
Mr. Chairman, through you, before the discussion happens, just as a reminder, regardless of the vote tonight, you will have the second meeting in June, so long as we have quorum for it, just because of the way, how far in advance we do legal ads. So no matter what, there is a second meeting in June, and no matter what, there's only one meeting in July because of the holiday. That's all.
It's funny, it's a sweet and sour kind of thing. I like the fact that we're nearly done with this meeting at 8 o'clock. However, having 2 meetings a month is also a bit of a trial sometimes, to have to kind of get myself set up for a meeting. So I see the good and the bad of it, and I wouldn't say I've been clamoring one way or another to axe it or to emphatically keep it. I'm curious what you all have for impressions.
I'd like to understand from the staff perspective and what you've heard from applicants, what those impressions are of the 2 meetings per month versus 1.
Mr. Chairman, through you, so applicants haven't commented on it yet. I will say from a staff perspective, while it is harder to, there's a little bit of difficulty in getting out the reports faster. I will admit from a staff perspective, especially as we've had other staff being note takers, there's currently someone sitting taking notes right now. It is nice to have the meetings done not at 11 p.m. from a staff perspective. But I do also understand it is harder for those with families, things like that. And I will also note that it has been nice that when we didn't have quorum, it was easier to continue to the direct next meeting rather than missing an entire month. I believe last summer we lost 2 months because we didn't have quorum 2 months in a row.
And those are good points too. And looking back on the past 6, has it been 6 months since we've been doing this? I think of it as about that.
Wow.
We haven't actually had them, I don't know how many times, but I feel like we've had maybe half of the months we haven't had our second meeting, maybe a third. I think we only had 1 meeting in May, is that right?
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, that is correct. We did But that wasn't a quorum issue. That was just because we didn't have applications in time for that meeting. I believe April, we did not have quorum for the second meeting.
Think
And the quorum issues should resolve themselves once we have some additional bodies, right? So,
Mr. Chairman, through you, yes, that's correct. And we're hoping they've made it through their second round of interviews and it's going to a final vote at the City Council, either at this upcoming City Council meeting or the next one, because I know they're working on budget, so they may bump that to the next meeting. And then they'll need to be trained and do their ethics training and things like that. But after that, they'll go ahead and start.
realistically, how many months, if you were to bet on when would we have people?
I
on
would
boards?
say for sure by the end of summer.
so we should be like rocking and rolling with the full group as of the September meeting, first September meeting.
That is my dream in life and my expectation.
Okay.
I'll also, from my point of view, I feel as though having the shorter meetings, which I found that most of these have been, since we've instituted this twice a month thing, even though it hasn't been twice a month, I do find that it's I mean, preferable to me to be winding it down earlier. I mean, I get up very early to start my business day, and 3.5 hours into these meetings, I just feel as though I'm not able to focus as much as I would if it was shorter. So I don't know. I don't mean to speak on behalf of others, but you guys are all experts and experienced at attending plenty of meetings. I imagine that not having to, be reviewing items at the 4th hour, it may help the process a little bit as well too. Again, I don't mean to speak on behalf of others, but I certainly feel as though it becomes a bit of a slog, when you're approaching 11 p.m. We haven't done that in quite some time, but when I joined the commission, Jesus, we used to be up in the 3rd floor of the city hall, eating stale candy at midnight, almost near tears. I remember myself tears on the inside at least. So this is a great improvement over those days.
It's a bleak picture you paint, Ryan.
I remember those, that little stuffy glorified closet.
That was tough.
Isn't that room windowless?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's also smaller now.
It couldn't even get smaller. There's no,
How
as
does
an
it get
architect, that
smaller?
question
Yeah,
whether
that
it's a
is-
code.
Jesus.
They removed some of the space to make more office space for staff. So I have no idea what it looked like before then, but I have been told it is definitely smaller.
Wow.
Brutal. All right.
Less than 7'6" in any direction. It's not a code compliant room, just let you know.
Right.
But those are my thoughts. I see that the bi-monthly or twice monthly setup is giving us some flexibility. As a parent, I can say that Tuesdays and Thursdays tend to be, for whatever reason, loaded up with a lot of stuff, so we have to shift things around. That's not a permanent thing. That's another year, but that's been surmountable. This summer, I can tell you there's probably going to be at least one meeting I'll have to miss. But we'll navigate that. How about you, Mr. Bauer? I think you might have views of your own.
So I was fairly opposed to the twice a month. I have to confess it has not been as difficult as I thought to have it be twice a month, although as several people pointed out, it hasn't actually been twice a month a number of times. Do we know how many times we've actually met twice in the same month?
I know that for the month of March, it was definitely twice. June will likely be twice as well. I think February might have been twice, but I'm not entirely positive because it's been a while. Definitely know April was not.
January.
What?
I think January might have had no meetings at all or something. There was like a long pause there.
That's true. And April and May. April had none and May had one.
Minutes. Yeah, personally, I'm not in a position to say absolutely not, I can't do this. And I acknowledge that there's some benefits for scheduling and staff who has other meetings as well, especially when Ms. White is, in attendance. So I personally would be willing to continue this way, maybe not for the rest of time. I want to check in, but this is the kind of thing we would probably, actually, if we approve this going forward, that would just be that way indefinitely, right? It's not that we would never have to check in again on it. It's not like a yearly thing.
Mr. Chairman, so you vote on your calendar every year. This was, normally we don't have a vote halfway through the year, but we were testing it out. So you would be revisiting the calendar again come December.
A question, I don't know if you've spoken with our prospective people, but they're okay. I mean, I guess they know what they're getting into.
They were discussed and we had meetings with them, and it was told that we are currently having 2 meetings a month so that they are aware that is what is happening.
I started out long ago, we had lots and lots of subcommittee meetings. I remember that basically made it twice a month. Then we put an end to those.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what do you all think? You already said your piece.
I agree with what you'd say. So my opinion would be we give it another 6-month run and revisit it in December.
All right, because we're halfway through our year already. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And at that point, we'll have all of our, yeah. Sorry, I cut you off, Dick.
No, I was just saying I would be okay with that plan.
Okay. And at that point, our new members will be in gear for have had a few months, and they can voice their opinions too.
Right.
Okay. All right. In that case, I guess I would entertain a motion that we, how do we phrase this? That we continue the twice monthly, or that we have to actually adopt individual dates on a calendar?
Mr. Chairman, I believe since the last vote in December was conditioned, all you need to do is accept the 2023 calendar as proposed, because it's the one that's been put up on the city for the time being. So you can just say that and that would work.
I move that we adopt the 2023 calendar as posted on the city's website.
Second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of adopting the city's calendar for 2023? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do our roll call. Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
I'll vote yes. So we'll keep going this way. Next, we have 2 sets of minutes, the March 7th and the March 21st meeting minutes, which I will confess I have not read yet. I'm going to pull those up quickly. Anybody know yet if they have any changes to those or thoughts?
I move that we accept the March 7th, 2023 meeting minutes.
I second that.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do a roll call of Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Alvey,
Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. Yeah, these look like good meetings minutes. And we'll move on to the 21st minutes.
I move the adopted the March 21st minutes.
I second that.
Favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And we'll do our roll call. Mr. Bauer,
Yes.
Mr. Falvey,
I'm going to abstain because I was absent.
okay. Vice Chair Kelly,
Yes.
and I will vote yes. These minutes seem very well written. I don't have issues with them, so they're compliments. Okay. CPC update. So I'm your handy dandy CPC rep. And I attended the last meeting we had. And at this stage, we're in the process of soliciting new proposals for the next funding round. For the next, what are we going to call it, the next season or term. So we're kind of like the net is out there, and there's discussion about how best to get people's word out that there's the CPC out there. And there's also discussion and approval of I forgot what it's called, the plan, the framework that we use, which was a lot of thoughts gone into that before it got to me. So that was hammered out. And the funding formula was agreed to and reapproved for the next year. And this is the formula which is used to decide which categories get what percentage of money. I think it was, as usual, this historic is the bottom of the barrel for importance level. We're at 15%. Open space, I think, was 20%. Affordable housing is 50%. 5% goes to the administration of the program, and then whatever the delta, the net is math is escaping me right now. It's sort of like sorry?
I think 10% is left over.
10%. It's like a flexible account that can get doled out to whichever, whoever needs it most from year to year. And there seems to still be quite a bit of money in the pot that's sort of unspent that we dug into a bit last year to fund the high number of historic projects. So even though we officially are at the lower end of how things are designated, it seems like things just sort of work out. And it often seems to take efforts of our previous representatives, thank you, Mr. Bauer, and just kind of speaking with applicants, getting creative with how much money they really need. Can stuff be phased? Things like that. It seems like we're able to kind of keep things going that way. So there are variables about how much money we'll get the next time because the state hasn't decided yet exactly how much they're gonna match. But the CPC staff does a pretty good job of estimating what they think in a conservative way, how much money we'll have to play with next year. And I don't have that number. I think it was around 2.5 million or so. But that's the gist of it. We're practically speaking right now, we're just waiting for new proposals to come forward, and then we'll see what, as a historic commission, what relates to us and what we think of it. Any questions about that? I feel like your updates were more detailed, Vic, when you were doing this, but
we were at a sort of different part of the process at that point.
okay. I don't think there was anything else that is going on. There's several new members, so I think there are 3 of us that we're kind of getting up to speed. And the document that you all have been kicking around for years that we reapproved, it's not the guidelines, what do we call it? The plan, the CPC plan. It's good. It's clearly a lot of work has gone into that, so I was impressed. Anyway, that's the CPC.
Well, thank you, Eric, for taking it over.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is everything on our agenda. Anything else, staff, that we should be talking about?
Not that I know of.
Case. It's 8:08. It looks like we're actually finishing while there's still daylight. Hazy daylight. Anything else going on? I guess we could close.
So one question, Ms. Chekowitz, and others, Mr. Parks through you, that idea of addressing the group of houses on Glenwood as
yes.
a local historic district where there are, 15 of them, rather than going through 15 preferably preserved, historically significant determinations, et cetera, as each one of these comes up over the years. I'm just wondering, what is our process for thinking about creating a local historic district?
Mr. Chairman, through you. Thinking about doing it, generally when we notice there's a large group, an area with intact set of buildings that have an association with each other in a history. Admittedly, Sarah White and I were looking at the area with some interest while I was doing the original historic significance report. That is a larger discussion that Sarah and I are actively having in the background based on the interest from the community. Maybe they would be interested in that.
Yeah.
I will be very honest. The process is long and we are very understaffed at this point. I think Sarah and I work somewhere around 60 to 70 hours a week. So we're moving at a snail's pace, but we are looking at it. And we've been looking at it since I did the first report.
Yeah, because it seems as though the majority of those homeowners would be in favor of something like that. And so where there is that interest and will, it would seem wise to, sort of assist their interests that align with historics.
Yes, I would like to say very quickly though, I wouldn't want to go too much in detail in this as this wasn't on the agenda, so no one from that neighborhood would have a chance to know it was being discussed or submit any comments.
Yes, yeah, just raising it as a topic for future
yes. So can we put that in, is it too late to put that on the agenda for our next meeting?
No, it's not. We can put on the agenda in other business for the June, I think it's 20th meeting.
I think that would be
Great,
good. Without wanting to deliberate it tonight, I think just that issue would be something worth discussing with our commission or with the neighbors or any combination thereof.
We can definitely put it on the agenda. I'll talk to Sarah White after this meeting.
Great.
you just, again, without discussing it, just note in relation to what Vice Chair Kelly said, it's not merely the alternative being to go through a whole bunch of cases, but the ability to control what goes on is much less in each one of those cases, and therefore in their sum than in the context of a historic district. So we'll have that discussion next month.
Yeah.
We're going to check that we can June 20th meeting if there's enough time, because we also want to make sure the street has time to look at it. But no later than July, it will be on the agenda.
Great, thank you.
So I don't think, but staff will know better, that we actually have to give any kind of formal notice.
We don't have to give formal notice. It's just, I think the best word I can use right now is consider it, to give them a chance to, you know.
We want them to know that.
Yes.
Actually, could we, is there any value in expanding that to a more general discussion about districts in Somerville? Is there anything, I don't want to bite off suddenly more than we want to handle right now, but if we want an opportunity to actually talk about outreach or the status of district creation or anything like that, or is that just kind of expanding that too much?
It depends on the topic exactly and what you're thinking it would be about. So if it's just how do we create, what is the process? You just want an overview of the process for creating LHDs, staff can talk about that at the next meeting. It depends on what the question is. Those could be 2 separate items, and then that would just, you also have time to think about it, and you can email us after the meeting. Staff, just as a reminder, don't email each other. You can email staff and we can take a look at how to best put it on the agenda.
Okay. I think that's a good discussion to have, but I personally would be in favor of getting started on Glenwood, where we have something really concrete with a lot of interest. And while we want the neighborhood to be able to participate, what we'll be talking about at the next meeting is simply starting the process. So there'll be a lot of opportunity for people to participate later on before we get to the end of the process. And I think people would probably rather have us start sooner than start later.
Right. Okay. All right.
So thank you, Vice Chair Carly, for bringing that up.
Great.
Well, nothing else, and I would entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved.
So moved. I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of that? Closing the meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Bauer?
Yes.
Mr. Falvey?
Yes.
Vice Chair Kelly?
Yes.
I'll vote yes as well. So we are closed. Thank you all. We'll see you in a few weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, Wendy.